Hi, good morning, and thank you very much for having me speak at the Train Control Management System Summit. My name's Simon Cook. I'm the Project Director for the ETCS program at Cross River Rail. What I'm going to talk about today is, as context, what Cross River Rail is and how we're going on building that, because that's what ETCS is here to support. And then I'll get into the detail of integration and operational readiness for ETCS Level 2. First up, though, I'd like to say an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of this country and the place of our meeting today, and recognise their continuing connection to lands, waters, and their communities. We pay our respects to the culture of our First Nations peoples and to elders past, present, and emerging. So Cross River Rail, which hopefully you have heard about, pretty exciting project here in Queensland. We're digging more than 10 kilometres of new tunnel and rail line. There's going to be twin tunnels bored under the Brisbane River, and that'll be fitted out. And of course, the most exciting part of that is ETCS Level 2 with automatic train operation right through the middle of the network. So this is going to be the biggest change to the rail network for decades and decades, and it's going to absolutely change the way that we travel in southeast Queensland. The core purpose for it is that there's a real significant constraint in the network at the moment, and that's the Merivale Bridge, where you can see the red line across the river at the moment. That was built in the 70s and it's nearing capacity, and that's a bottleneck to the network. So Cross River Rail is going to put another rail crossing in there and then connect that into the rest of the network. So a complex project because we're joining into the existing rail network, not just a standalone system. The tunnel itself isn't going to completely solve the capacity challenge, but you pair that with the new signalling and a new traffic management system, and that's going to put Queensland in a strong position capacity-wise for a long time. So the core purpose why we're building it, that bottleneck that I talked about, we've got huge growth coming, COVID notwithstanding, in the next few years, looking out 25-year horizon, then 2 million more people, and that's predominantly to the north and to the south, outside of Brisbane. But the jobs growth is going to be in central Brisbane, so that role of connecting people from north to the city and from the south to the city is crucial. As I mentioned, there's real issues at the core of the network, and every train on the network to go from north to the south has to pass through the same four inner city stations, through Roma Street, South Brisbane, South Bank, and Central. Transport planners have looked at the various solutions, and roads clearly aren't the answer. We're all rail enthusiasts here, so we know that rail is the answer to that. So this has to be about a rail solution, not a road solution. The project itself, though, isn't just about building a new railway. This is really important that we're developing these new precincts around each of the new stations. So this will transform the city itself as well as the network. So I'll just go quickly through the stations, starting from the south. This is Boggo Road Station, next to one of the biggest hospitals in Brisbane, so connecting that into the network much better. You go up to Woolloongabba, which most people will have heard of for the sports stadium there. So this will be a fantastic site in the future to have decent heavy rail connection to the stadium. At the moment, it's bus only. Then coming through to Albert Street Station. So this is in the heart of the city, right off the shopping mall. So that'll connect to a much better train link to the shoppers in that precinct. And then the fourth new underground station is Roma Street. Roma Street's already a busy hub. The long distance rail comes in here as well as obviously the suburban rail. So we'll connect into that and the buses, the coach terminals near there. So like the Grand Central equivalent in Sydney. Exhibition station, so that's currently only used for special events out at the Ekka, and that's going to become a 24/7 station and a big new precinct developing, opening up around there. So lots of benefits for the city, and not least for the rail network itself. ETCS, I always think it's core for that short section of tunnel, but this is the catalyst for changing the whole of the South East Queensland network, not just the tunnel itself. In terms of where we are with the construction, then there's a lot of station rebuilds that are associated, and they're underway. These 6 stations to the south where the new services will run through. The first of those is Yeronga. So this is some track replacement work that you can see going on there. These stations are getting full accessibility rebuild and then replacing the tracks and raising the platform height. At the south, where the tunnel will come out, then there's a huge amount of piling works going on there. This is a pretty complex junction. It's a bit hard to see in the picture, but there's the surface rail in the foreground, in the sort of middle ground, and then there's a freight flyover that crosses over those lines, and the tunnel's actually being dug very shallow underneath there. So we've got to squeeze everything into a pretty congested space. And then the underground station, so Boggo Road, the furthest south, and that box that you can see is pretty much complete. Woolloongabba, this is where the tunnel boring machines launched to head north under the river. There's the tunnel boring machine itself, so that kicked off a few months ago. And there's two of those driving from south to the north. And you can see on the website where they're at any given time. So they've crossed the river and currently beneath Albert Street at the moment. Albert Street Station. So the tunnel borers and machines have just gone through this site. This has got two separate entrances, one right by the shopping mall and one further down the street. And then Roma Street. So a huge change here. There was a massive transit centre built in the 70s, I think. That's been completely demolished, and this will be the heart of the new precinct around Roma Street. And then finally, where the tunnel comes out in the north, so piling and excavations there for the ramp where the TBMs will be recovered, and the new line will come out and join into the existing network. And another site that's pretty important is Main Yard itself. So this is the biggest stabling yard on the network currently. And the new rail lines you can see marked there on orange, they're going to come up and right through the existing rail yard. So a lot of changes needed in there to accommodate those lines coming through and going north. So there's just the context. What I really wanted to talk about today, obviously, is about the train control side of things. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the system itself, but more talk about our readiness approach and the challenge of system integration. But ETCS, just a very short sort of summary of where we're at. As you'd know, then you don't start these things off in the live environment. So the first step was to get our systems integration lab established. So the actual Shorncliffe line, which is going to be the first line that we fit with ETCS, was built into the systems integration lab last year. And we've had a lot of testing going on in there, end-to-end testing of the software and the system to build confidence before we do any physical deployment. Shorncliffe line was chosen as it's going to be a test track, and then a pilot line go into revenue services before we move into the tunnel environment. What you can see in the picture there is the first of our trains being fitted. So that's SMU 263 out at Red Bank, which is an old diesel facility that we've changed so that can be used for the upgrade of the existing fleet with ETCS. So we're doing 64 trains there, still in the first and second trains are underway at that shed at the moment, but we'll move into series production later in the year. The civils work has started on the Shorncliffe line, so laying new cable and conduits, putting in the equipment huts, axle counters and all of the bits and pieces we need on track. And the first of the radio masts is going to go up at the end of this month. And the other thing to note on here, it was an associated project that I'll talk about later, but we've made a massive upgrade to the interlockings at Main as preparation for the ETCS signalling project coming along. Overall, then going really well, and we're on track to meet the critical interface milestones that are needed to support Cross River Rail. Just a few pictures on the left, that's the new upgraded train cabin prototype, so the new desk. Had to make quite a lot of changes in here to fit in the new screens. Everything was analog before. You can see on the right hand screen we've had to do a sort of electronic representation of the sunflower for when it's in non-ETCS mode, because that dial had to be removed to fit the screens in. And on the right, hard to find an interesting picture of most things ETCS, but here's some guys having a play with the systems integration lab out at Eagle Farm. So getting into the scope of ETCS overall, the ETCS project covers a lot more than just pure ETCS. Some of the main functions that we're putting in for Queensland Rail are electronic train graphing for improved prevention and detection of conflicts and logging of train movements, automatic route setting, automatic train operations. That's only going to be in the tunnel to start with in that closed environment, but we will test it on the Shorncliffe line before we deploy in the tunnel. The tunnel ventilation system is a key part of the tunnel. We don't have, in Queensland, we don't have any tunnels longer than a few hundred metres. They're not true tunnels. So in terms of specifying how the system will work with a tunnel ventilation system and then platform screen doors in the underground railway as well, then there's some significant interfaces we need to build with ETCS. So that that graphic on the left just tries to show some of those big chunks coming together. How we see it as a system on a whole, and the diagram on the right just shows the complexity of what we're working with here. I think anybody that's put in a new system understands the importance of all the stakeholder links in there. This is potentially a bit more complicated because we're in a brownfield environment already, and we're having to work alongside two other big contracts. There's the Tunnel Stations Development PPP, which is actually digging the tunnels and will maintain the tunnels and the stations in the long term. And there's the Rail Integration and Systems contract, and that's doing the brownfield sections and connecting the existing railway in and integrating overall for the tunnel. So we have to work in with them, and we have to obviously work with Queensland Rail, who are the operator. The Department of Transport and Main Roads is the project sponsor. And we've also got an independent certifier and independent safety advisor on the project. So getting into how we're delivering, trying to keep it simple on the slides here, but what we think is really important in successfully delivering ETCS into operations. This is all focused on making sure that Queensland Rail are operationally ready and supported. So this isn't a project that we're doing in isolation. We've got Queensland Rail front and centre of what we're doing. These three parts, integration, collaboration and operational readiness, are all interrelated through the life of the project and carry us through into daily operations. These three things really are key to how to do it. If you don't work out your integration, if you don't work together and you don't plan from day one, for day one, then the deployment's not going to go well. So just to break this down a little bit, integration is about, in terms of existing operational control and planning systems, these all need to be I suppose fit for purpose for integration with ETCS. So a lot of systems in Queensland Rail's control room at the moment, and some of those will need upgrades so that we can plug ETCS into them. And that leads on to that seamless integration. We've got to be able to provide transfer of data up and down from existing operational control and planning systems through to the traffic management system, and that's got to support the new ETCS environment. And integration isn't just in ETCS, of course, then we do have to plug into the rest of the tunnel systems that I mentioned before, the tunnel ventilation system, platform screen doors, and other safety systems. In terms of automation, then this isn't so much the automatic train operation, but more automation of processes that are going in the control room. So we want to make improvements to the railway operations itself, bringing reliability and efficiency to the control room operations. We're really going to ramp up the intensity of the network here. Cross River Rail's built with a timetable headway of 24 trains an hour. It'll be some time before there's the need to do that. But in terms of getting the system in and fit for purpose with 24 trains an hour, then that's a significant step up. So automation is a really key part of how we're going to get there. Collaboration, I'm really proud of the moves we've made forwards on this. Our contract with Hitachi, who are delivering ETCS for the project, is a DNC contract and probably quite challenging for the first year. And we took a step back just after Christmas and thought, how can we do this differently? So created a real one-team approach with Queensland Rail and Hitachi, along with my team, to make sure that we work together in getting this delivered successfully. And we've seen a real step forward since we took that decision to work in a different way. In terms of what that looks like on the ground, then that means getting Queensland Rail SMEs and operators into the systems integration lab to really understand what work Hitachi have been doing, build confidence in the system, looking at progressive delivery rather than going for a big bang approach, then going in smaller steps to build confidence in the system, and then working through with the other projects onto the tunnel testing. So front loading as much as we can from the testing and commissioning program off of Qd Rail so that we have confidence in how you bring it in. In terms of operational readiness, then this is, I suppose, a well-known path, but the important thing is just to start early. So identifying the changes required and setting your baseline, working out how to adapt systems. So we do want to do an off-the-shelf implementation of ETCS, and that's the way we're going. But even so, you need to make changes to other systems to integrate everything properly. And then the implementation stage is all about preparing Queensland Rail for the new environment through specifically targeted readiness activities. So just a breakdown of the system itself and what that integration means to us. And I'll start from the right-hand side. If you look at the diagram, then broken it into 3 boxes. There's activities going on within Queensland Rail's existing systems, and then the Hitachi core system. And then on the left-hand side is the integration with the broader Qd Rail system. And all of these need to work seamlessly. So some of the headline figures you can see at the top there, more than 50 in total of different interfaces and planning system changes that need to be worked through. And the starting point for that was coming up with operational scenarios. So that's how we build the confidence of the operator that all this stuff is going to work. And we finished off just a few weeks ago writing all of those operational scenarios that will give confidence that the system, when built, will work as planned. So within that Queensland Rail box on the right-hand side, those 32 new planning system interfaces and 20 upgrades to existing planning systems. And we need to build that Queensland Rail TMS gateway. So that's going to give the transfer of messages from all of those planning and delivery systems through to ETCS itself. And there's new systems coming in here as well. This is where traffic management system comes in. So Queensland Rail currently use paper train graphs still. So one of the biggest changes that the control room will see was the move to electronic train graphing, as well as the new traffic management system. In terms of the blue box there that's labelled Hitachi, this is the core of the system with that electronic train graph and automatic route setting, as well as a new possession management system, and that'll include mobile devices for people working out on the track to book in and have recorded notifications of the possession that's been taken. And then onto the Qd Rail box. So this is where the tunnel ventilation system is probably the key one. Tunnel ventilation and platform screen door interfaces that need to be able to communicate with ETCS and the ATO functionality so that we can tell when the doors are closed and locked and get the train to stop accurately. So hopefully this diagram displays well on the screen, but if not, happy to give some more detail offline. What we're trying to show here is the progressive delivery of integration testing, starting from the left to the right. So I mentioned earlier the systems integration lab itself, and that's where we start doing all of the testing. I suppose the seven critical functions that we need to get right that will allow the tunnel to be commissioned. So ETCS itself, then the planning system that I mentioned on the previous slide, operational systems, telecoms, of course, with the radios, platform screen doors, tunnel ventilation systems, and finally automatic train operation. So this stage commissioning that we've got, starting with the SI lab, we then go into shadow mode testing out on the Shorncliffe line. So Shorncliffe line is crucial to de-risking the tunnel itself. It's always been planned to be the pilot line for ETCS, but we've made some changes recently to change the way that we're going to use it. So it's going to be used rigorously as a test track. We're hoping to do the first train movement out there later this year, and we'll go through progressive testing on the Shorncliffe line. before we make the move to full revenue service. So you can see, moving across the boxes on the slide there, we eventually get to revenue service, and that's when we're proving all of the systems coming together. And we're going to simulate platform screen doors. We're going to simulate tunnel ventilation system out there on the Shorncliffe line, so that we build confidence before we go into tunnel testing. And as with any tunnel project, there's a pretty tight time frame or window that we're going to get between tunnel completion and access for ETCS and other systems testing and getting the train in there for readiness. So that's why we're doing everything we can to de-risk and save time by testing things on the Shorncliffe line. The go live readiness is a really important step in there. So all this is about progressively building confidence, not just for Queensland Rail themselves, but also for the independent safety assessor and building the safety case to ONSA at the end of the day. So the first milestone that we actually passed on this project wasn't pure ETCS, but a really important signalling upgrade. We've had to replace one of the most complex, probably the most complex interlocking that's on the current railway. So circled there is the main area. It's actually 3 interlockings. A project that was long overdue, but the disruption to the network and readiness to deliver the change has been sort of put off for too long. The project was first thought of 42 years ago to start thinking about how to upgrade this junction. So about a year and a half in the making, and over Easter that's just passed, then we managed to do the work itself. So a 4-day shutdown where we got rid of all of the existing relays and replaced them with 3 processor-based interlockings. And this was really what the catalyst for this one team approach of working with Hitachi and Queensland Rail was. We really thought we weren't going to get this done. You can't do something on this scale to the railway without complete collaboration and buy-in between everybody that's involved, and that really was one of the keys to success. So great work by Hitachi in the design, fantastic work by Queensland Rail in supporting the implementation of this over Easter. The reason we had to do it is pretty simple, that this is very old equipment and nearing end of life, but it also meant a real constraint on the network. So what we were able to do with splitting this up in a different way is it means that the routes can be set in different ways through the main area. So when it comes to switching on the tunnel, then you can connect in the new lines coming up through the main stabling yards that you saw on the picture earlier, and realign all of the signalling through that area. I'll just move on to some of the challenges, experiences and learnings on operational readiness that we found to date, and the way that we're going to be focusing going forwards. First up, challenges, then identifying the right processes and identifying well documented processes for day-to-day operations was quite hard. So I talked about the operating states and the forgot my word, sorry. The operational scenarios. So operational scenarios for how the railway works was really key. The original plan and the way that we were going to work through this was very high level, and then work through increasing levels of detail. After about 3 months, then we found that really wasn't going to work. The operator needs to know detail of how this system is going to work from day one, so that we can really understand how that's going to work and make sure that the system's fit for purpose. So then took months and months, I think about 9 months of really hard work through these operational scenarios to make sure that everything that the railway needs to do was covered off, and that can definitely be factored into the system design. That meant documenting a whole load of new procedures, testing them on literally hundreds of stakeholders across different businesses. So that was one of the biggest challenges, and of course the other one, apart from systems and processes, is always around people. And we haven't had challenging people, but the people challenge is significant. mentioned the electronic train graph. That's probably the most visible change that will be happening in the control room itself. But of course, the change for train guards, train drivers, even station staff, everybody's going to see a change through bringing in ETCS and particularly ATO through the tunnel, working with platform screen doors and so on. Is a completely different railway by the time we've finished here, which is really exciting, but also a huge scale of change. I also mentioned the different stakeholders and the complexity of that. That gets really difficult as well, just trying to keep everybody on board and up to speed with what we're doing, and not re-prosecuting decisions. In terms of experience, though, what we've seen is really, really positive and inspiring. I was really happy with the way that the main upgrade went, and that's proven to me, to Queensland Rail, to everybody that's involved, that we can successfully deliver big change to the railway. And now that we've started fitting trains, then there's something a lot more visible about the project. People can understand that this is coming really quite soon. So we've got a lot of excitement building, and pleased to see we've got really, really strong leadership within Queensland Rail leading the change along. I mentioned the operational scenarios once I found my words. So the SMEs involved with that have been fantastic, getting them to understand the change to the system, talk about the impact and adaptation that might be needed from an operational perspective to run the railway in a different way, and building those close relationships, working with us and Hitachi to get a good future state view of the railway. One of the challenges that I've learned from other projects is people wanting to try and retrofit old systems and processes onto a new system. So we've taken that lesson learned and being very careful not to fall into that trap. And so far, so good. We're staying on a bespoke. We're not doing a bespoke, sorry. We're staying on the off-the-shelf version of ETCS and adapting the railway to make sure that it works. Into operational readiness. So a long road still to go here, but the processes that we put into making sure that this is successful seem to be going very well. First of all, building the excitement for the project, and that's really happening now. And once we start testing later this year, I think we'll see another step change in that sort of excitement and welcoming of the project in. From the practical perspective, then a lot of effort going into the risk-based training needs analysis. So people who've worked in operational readiness will know all about that, but very detailed review of people's roles and working through training gaps. We delivered our first Train the Trainer course for train crew about a month ago now, and that went down really well with the train crew trainers. So they heard minimal feedback, and they're ready to start rolling out training to a handful of train drivers to start with. We're going to be in test mode for a long time, so we're not training large numbers of drivers. We need to keep them in date for everybody that we train. So just doing probably 20 drivers to start with, and then we'll work our way through once we're getting ready for actual rollout and revenue service. Some of the other changes aren't just limited to ETCS, but we need to really work very closely with people that are looking at other change for the railway. Platform screen doors, getting ready for 24 train an hour operation through the tunnel. It's 4 years off before the tunnel's open, but that readiness journey needs to start now. So getting into the operational scenarios, not just for pure ETCS, but all of the tunnel operations has been a big part of it. So working with the RIS project, the Rail Integration Systems project, to make sure that the overall tunnel readiness is right too. So we need to be absolutely clear that those operational scenarios and our readiness is bang on for that limited testing window that we get before the tunnel opens. So just to wrap up, what we're looking at project-wide for all of Cross River Rail by the end of this year is all of the underground stations will be activated. Those twin tunnels will be driven all the way through to the northern portal, and lots of station works. More importantly, more excitingly than for ETCS, then we've already done that main yard interlocking. Train fitment will be well underway with production there, and Shorncliffe line completely built and pilot line testing underway, proving the system, and that first step of demonstrating that this is going to work and be ready for the tunnel. going into the overall bigger picture, well, what does that mean? Just coming back to what I said to start with, this project, ETCS, is a catalyst for changing the railway itself, and Qd Rail is part of changing Southeast Queensland. But it's the changes to the railway that I'm most excited about. This is a once-in-a-lifetime project here. It's going to completely change the way that the Southeast Queensland network operates, and that's really, really exciting. The project itself is already paying dividends for Queensland. One of the most exciting things to happen to Queensland is we're pretty confident about the Olympics, and it's that connection at Wollongabba, the new station, the capacity that we're building for the network that's absolutely key to that. So really exciting future ahead. I'd like to wrap up there. Thank you very much for your attention and for inviting me again to be here. A bit difficult being online. I'm really happy to take offline questions, and if anybody wants to come and see, COVID allowing, what's going on up here in Queensland, then please get in touch. I'm really proud of our project and happy to share what we've been doing. Thank you.